Yes. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar at Secura about analyzing the human factor. Sofia is going to talk about data on security awareness and behavior. So I'll let you do your introduction, and then I'll do a short introduction from Secura now. My name is Floris Dufekot. I'm the market group manager of the behavior team within Secura. From Secura, we are a cybersecurity company established already in 2000 with a mission to provide insight into your digital security. And I think what is special is that we really look from an holistic point of view towards security from a people, process, and technology view. And today, of course, we're going to talk about the people part of security. We're divided in several market groups, in public market groups, finance, technology, industrial, and product manufacturers. And my team with psychologists and project managers manage projects about behavior, questions from behavior and awareness projects of our clients. And I think today we're going to showcase you why, well, we have a very nice and good view on how you should approach human behavior within your organization. So Sofia, the floor is yours.
Why, thank you, Floris, for this very brief introduction. Like Floris said, today I will take you to the interesting world of cybersecurity and then humans in cybersecurity, so human behavior. And I'm really excited about this talk today because today I get to present data. But first, information security officers ask me these questions. So security, we train and explain, but our people don't behave. Or what's the best way to create a security awareness campaign? Or should I reward or punish? And then at the bottom, as you already read, maybe there's other questions as well that you have. Please put them in the question box, and then we'll get back to those later. Training people, getting people to do what you want them to do is not as easy as it may seem. Because mostly we tell people how to behave. We inform them and instruct them, and then they don't do it. And then the conclusion is people are the weakest link in cybersecurity. But knowing what is desired from people is not the same as being able to influence them, to get them to do it. And that's because people are complex and they're different. People are not computers. And we do treat them like they are a rational being. They're not. And the fact that we are humans ourselves does not make us experts on human behavior. In fact, if you take it the other way around, you wouldn't ask me, a psychologist, to configure a firewall. At least you shouldn't do this if you want it to function properly. So you ask an expert for this, a technical expert. The other way around, we do expect technical experts, which most CISOs are, to be able to influence a whole organization. But if you think about your family or your housemates, are you able to influence their behavior? Can you get them to do the dishes if you want them to? Well, if this is a hard task, then how can we expect of technical experts that they are able to change a whole organization? My name is Sofia Aleman. I'm a scientist in cybersecurity and in psychology. So my title is Behavioral Scientist, Cybersecurity and Compliance. And I've been in IT for a couple of years. I was a software test analyst. So my job was testing software to make sure that it was doing what it was supposed to do. And a big part of that is also making sure that it is secure, so that you have safe software. What most of my colleagues did was making sure that technically everything was in order. So they had really strict measures to make sure that the software worked. But what happens if you make really strict software that doesn't allow you to do the things you want to do for your work? Then people start finding their ways around. They start creating olifant patches. For example, our minister who recently emailed files to his private email address because you are supposed to work in the weekends. Well, so if you really want to have a safe environment, you have to take into account the software, the technical measures do have to work, but also you have to take into account the people using this software, because the tools, they have to be workable. So what we do here at Secura is combining these expertises. So we have loads of technical experts, but we also have psychologists. And in psychology, I learn a lot from my technical colleagues. So I learn about the processes, I learn about what's technically possible, but I also learn what is desired from people. So what does a CISO want that a whole company does? And the other way around, cybersecurity, of course, learns from psychology. And this way, you get the best possible option. You get the best possible out of your employees. So now that we've covered that, back to the main lesson of this webinar. People are not rational. But what we do is put most of our efforts into awareness trainings. So new procedures, we're sending emails, we're putting posters in elevators. We're sending all this knowledge because we rely on the assumption that people will behave rationally. And when they don't, we conclude that people are the weakest link. But if you look at daily life, example, we've known for years that this isn't healthy, yet you still see people do it. There's laws that prohibit texting when you're driving, and they're in place for over 3 years now, but you still see people texting on the bike or when they're in a car, or speed limits, or even when there's a really big sign, we still have some issues sticking to the rules. So there's many examples that show that people know, but they don't show the behavior. So that means that knowledge and awareness doesn't guarantee the desired behavior. And if you ask me, that means that awareness doesn't mean safe behavior. So if you know, you don't necessarily act safe. I've shown you a couple of daily life examples, and well, we've been experiencing a lot of examples in cybersecurity too, but the scientist in me said you should substantiate these findings. So you should do some research. So that's what we did. And this is how we did it. First, when we start a program to make sure that employees act safe and our customers get more resilient, what we do is a behavior scan. So step 1 is a behavioral measurement. And then after we've measured behavior, so that's a social engineering exercise mostly, we do a site assessment. So we go to a company and we measure what we actually see there. So is there clean desks? Are there lockers? Do the lockers work? Or can I just open them? Because there's a key in the locker. And the third part of this measurement is a knowledge and motivation survey that we send out online to all employees. Last year, we were able to collect loads of data, and a couple of companies said to us that we could combine their data to research our statements, to corroborate them. So We made a sample and it consisted of 1,155 respondents, and these were 20 organizations in healthcare. And in order to assess ability, we did the knowledge test that I mentioned, and we assessed this on 15 different ISO and NIST topics. And each question, there was one right answer, 2 wrong answers, and people could also indicate, I don't know the answer to this question. After each knowledge question, we also asked people, well, you know, do you actually show this behavior, or do you stick to these guidelines? Do you adhere? And these questions were scored on a, I never do this, no, 1, 2, I always do this, I always follow this policy, 5. There's a side note to this question, because this is self-report. And we generally tend to be more positive about our own behavior than it is in real life. And well, we also do this measurement in China, for example, then you get really different stories. We were lucky that this was a Dutch example, and Dutch tend to be quite blunt, but still we see this happening even for a Dutch population. So the answers that we see here are most likely more positive than they are if I would sit next to someone and actually score their behavior. But me saying this, I think that's actually even making more of a case for my hypothesis, because, well, and this is a hint at what the results show, the gap between knowledge and behavior is still there. So even when we ask people to report on their own behavior, we still see this gap. Let me take you to the results. So on average, over the 15 topics, this is what we saw. So if you look at knowledge or awareness, you'd say, oh, we're scoring over half. We're doing okay. It could be better, but we're doing okay. Mind you, this is an average. If we look at the 15 different topics, there's a wide range. So for some topics, only 15% knew the right answer. For some topics, nearly everyone, so 96% knew the right answer. Did we see patterns? Yes, we did. I'm not going to go over all the 15 topics separately, but I want to take you through the patterns. And what struck us is that most items that score high, so over 80%, they're common sense items, meaning that you don't have to work at a specific company to know the correct answer. So yes, you're always supposed to not leave important information unguarded. So have a clean desk, lock your computer, and also address a stranger without a badge when that stranger isn't supposed to be in that area. Topics that scored lower are the more technical or applied knowledge topics. So yes, people do know they shouldn't click on a phishing link, but if I ask them, what exactly should you check in an email to make sure it is a phishing email, then people have a hard time. Or if I ask them, how do you know if this URL, this link is safe? Then they're, in most cases, not able to tell me the right answer. But this is knowledge. How about knowledge and behavior? Does knowing also mean doing? You know the answer, right? I have a few specific examples for you. The first one I want to show is locking your computer screen. On knowledge, there was a really high score for this example. So 88% knows you're supposed to lock your screen as soon as you walk away from your computer, as soon as it's unguarded. If we ask people, do you also adhere to this policy? 42% says they always do this. So in 46% of these cases, people do know they're supposed to show this behavior, but they don't do it. Other examples, strong passwords. Knowledge was also really hard for this one. So 82% knows the correct answer. They knew to pick from a list of 4 options the best password. And these weren't easy options, so it was kind of hard to tell which the right one was. You really were supposed to know the rules for strong passwords. But if we ask people, do you have a strong password? Only 31% said they actually have a strong password. So over half of this sample, they knew what the strongest was, but they say they don't have a strong password. And again here, like with knowledge, there's variance amongst the topics, and I have a huge slide with loads of information on it. But the point here is that what I want to show you, look at the red bars, that there's a range from 10%, so 10% who knows but doesn't do it, to 54% who knows but doesn't stick to the policy, which is a huge difference. Here also we see trends, by the way, because topics where enforcement is a big thing, there the gap is smaller. So for two-factor authentication, which in most companies is just not a toggle that users or employees trigger themselves, but this is just set for them. 60% knows about the rules for two-factor authentication. And if we ask them, do you also stick to these rules? 48% confirms that they do this. Overall, this is what we see. So knowledge is okay. 62% knows it. But on average, only half of this group actually shows the behavior. So if you look at these numbers, for the red part, it makes sense to tell people what they have to do. There it makes sense to provide knowledge, to train them, to explain them, or to have these nice posters in the elevator. But for the darker gray part, there people already know it, but they still don't do it. And if you were to go tell people again what they have to do, it's not going to change their behavior because they already know. In fact, if you're going to tell them again, they'll probably get annoyed because they already knew and there's something else that's blocking their behavior. But I think this proves my point that also in cybersecurity, knowing or awareness doesn't mean that people actually do it. And that means that if you want to have a cyber resilient, a cyber safe company, your focus shouldn't be just on awareness. Your focus should be on safe behavior as an end goal. And how do you do this? I'm gonna talk to you about a very fundamental psychological theory by McInnes. And this theory says that behavior is the result of 3 factors. So ability or awareness, knowledge, that's 1 out of 3 factors. So it is important. People should know what's expected of them or what the rules are. Otherwise, they're not going to show the behavior. But they also should be aware of the risks and should be motivated and should be able to gauge what consequences are. Because if they're not motivated, they might know, but if they don't think it's important, they're not going to do it. And thirdly, there's opportunity. And an example here is working under your own account. If you want your employees to use their own account always, and you've been telling them for years, so they know. And they know it's important. But they also confirm this. So we do interviews at companies and then we ask, why don't you do it? Well, this company, they confirmed with me, yeah, I think it's important to use my own account. But I cannot do my work under my own account. So I have to log these medical results in this sample's case but I cannot do that under my own account. So then the issue is with opportunity. And that's the issue, the barrier that you want to address. So don't go telling them again, don't go motivating them, but help them create the right accounts with the right authorization so they can actually do their work. I've got another example for you, reporting incidents. Oh, and this, I'm sorry for this. So this is turning out to be a Dutch class as well. For example, if you want your employees to report incidents and they don't know what they should report or where they should report, then you have to tell them. But if they know and they still don't do it, you have to check for the other two factors. So do they think it is important to report incidents? So, vinden ze het belangrijk? And what makes them think it is important or not? Because for this company, I asked people, so why don't you report incidents? And then they said, well, I've been doing this in the past, but I never heard back. So apparently my company doesn't think it's important. So I stopped doing it because it's quite a hassle to report these incidents. And thirdly, was another organization, but I'm going to use this example anyways. That company also wanted their employees to report incidents, but there wasn't a clear point where to report incidents. So it was a jumble of different structures within the company, and people just didn't have one point to go to when there was an issue. So if the issue, the barrier, is ability or knowledge, then it makes sense to go educate your people. But if the issue is motivation, then go motivate them. And you're not motivating people by telling them for the umpteenth time what they have to do, because they already know. And if the issue is in opportunity, then you have to go facilitate. So make sure that there is a proper point where people can report incidents, or make sure that they are lockers that actually work for every employee where they can store their valuable information. Like I already said, in our measurement, we also take into account motivation and opportunity. We measure these factors both, and there's more research on that. We measure motivation, for example, by two questionnaires. One scientific one, in which we check for whether people are externally motivated, so motivated by rewards or punishments, or if they are internally motivated more. So because they are intrinsically, they're interested in this topic. And apart from that, we also have a very practical measurement. So we ask people to rate each topic on importance. And this provides really nice numbers, which I would like to discuss with you, but we're saving these for a future webinar, which will be in Q3, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I will get back on that with you. And if you want to know the exact date, which is not known yet now, please follow us on LinkedIn, because we post there regularly about this topic as well, and we will also share the date with you when it's known. And if you want to have the numbers and conclusions that we presented on just now, send us an email to safe@secura.com, and then we'll share these numbers with you. There is a date that is yet known. One of my colleagues, Paul, will be presenting on raising resilience against ransomware attacks, of which the human aspect, so human behavior, is a big part as well. So please check out his webinar if you want to know more about this topic. It's on June 23rd. For now, I think Jacqueline told me to have this, to show this one to you, because at the end of the webinar, we would really like you to fill out 3 short questions. So please don't close your screen right away after we're done, but check out the survey.
Well, I think, Sophie, thank you for your presentation during this webinar. I think one of the nice components of the webinar is now as well that some people from home can ask questions if they would like to. There are not a lot of questions yet, so please feel free to fill in the chat box. It is anonymous. I can only see your question in there. But there is one question, and that is, I'll just read it from the screen. That is, you have this data from this healthcare institution or organization, and you say people are very different. But is it possible to compare people between different sectors, for example? So do you see different results from people in healthcare than in public, or can you say something about that? Is the question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the question, anonymous person. And yeah, definitely we can compare across branches as well, especially if it comes to the common results. So the things you know without necessarily working at a specific company or in a specific work field. So lock your screen. You should do that everywhere. Guard sensitive information. Or address strangers on the work floor. And for example, in this sample, there were hospitals where obviously there's lots of patients and visitors. So that question, it is specific for this branch. And if you ask for behavior in that sense, you have to specify the question, of course, to areas where visitors shouldn't be. And there's actually a really nice story in this one. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share, but I'm gonna do it without mentioning specifics. So we also do these site assessments where we go to a company or to a location to test how people respond there. And we were at an unnamed hospital where we were not allowed to be in certain areas, but where one of my colleagues was able to access an operation room and actually got dressed as a surgeon to be ready for an operation. Well, and this, of course, that's the kind of behavior that we test during these assessments. So how far can we go? What happens if we go to sites and start filming or taking photos? What happens if we start asking questions about security? Will people answer what the password policy is? So how strict, how strong should passwords be? Is it 8 characters? Should there be a capital in there? And this all is information that goes for every company. This is information that you don't want your employees to share with a stranger, which I am at the point that I'm testing during a site assessment. I'm drifting off, I think.
Well, I think what you said complements very well as well to a question we have from someone from the audience, because someone asks is how would you incorporate your research in a security policy? And you're saying that employees are telling the minimum password strength to our social engineers, but based on our research, you do a behavioral measurement or behavior review. How would you incorporate? I think the question is, how would you incorporate the research in a security policy? What findings could you use? Is that for capacity? Is it for motivation? Or is that for opportunity? Is that
It's for all three, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a nice question. So if I rephrase it, it's how do you use these findings to inform your policy?
Or to adjust your policy.
Yeah. Well, before we start with such an assessment, we always check with the customer what the current policy is. So for example, the survey that we send out to employees of our customers, we always check it in advance to make sure that the wording is okay, but also that the situations apply to the people that we are sending the survey to. And you would say it's a list of 15 questions in this case, so easy peasy, right? Because it's general ISO and NIST topics, but usually it takes quite a lot of time, because asking these questions makes our the people who give us the assignment realize what's my policy? Does it actually work this way? Oh, does it actually work for my employees if I put the policy this way? So before we even start doing our research, usually already the policy is being improved before we start asking questions to employees. So that's phase one, where the policy is improved. And then after, when we have results, we know how people actually behave in specific situations. So based on that, you can really upgrade your policy even more to make sure that it fits people, your people, and not just the processes you had in mind or the technical measures you have implemented. Is that a huge answer to the question?
Well, I think it answers the question, and I think it also gives a little bit of insight in if you start the behavior measurement, you also challenge the CISO or the information security officer with you say that the policy is defined that way, or you say that this is the right answer within
this company,
your organization, yeah. But can employees actually know it because it's in a policy, and what is in the exact policy? And I think it also provides a nice insight in how you approach that.
Yeah.
I also have
policy-wise, one more thing though. Recently, we were at a company and they had a password manager, which is really good. It's good if you have one, but it was a really difficult password manager to use for users. So what they did is still have the post-its at every laptop, and then that was their password manager. And the CISO in this case said, but we have this password manager, we've been telling them. But since it was such a complex tool, it would only have worked if you explain this tool to people. So during onboarding, get people to sit with you and install it together right away. Then people know that this is how things work at the new company where they get to, and they know how to use the tool. Yeah. So it's a really easy step, but it's going to change behavior big time.
Yeah, and maybe also to, I think what you say is the company provided a password manager. Here's a question from someone who says, could you give an example, or can you share some specific examples how to motivate people? Is this the same case that people weren't motivated to use the password manager, or was it too difficult for them? What was
I think in this case it was both, because a couple of people were actually using it, and once you had it installed, it was really intuitive to use. You only had to the installation, that was the hard part. So it was motivation in the sense that a couple of workers said it's too difficult. And also some answers were, I don't think I need it because I only have 2 passwords and they fit on my post-it, so I don't need the vault. But then we did a site assessment with this colleague actually for us, and we did that one, and then we found these post-its. So that's not safe if you stick them to your laptop. And now I'm lost in the example.
No, yeah, I think the question was could you give an example of how to motivate people for an example you have?
You wanna, so in this case, let's continue to use this example. So in this case, you always, but especially when it comes to motivation, you really want to know why people don't do it yet. So you want their reason to not do it. So go ask them, and ask them like 5 times, like a toddler does. So why is the sky blue? It's blue because, well, now it's gray actually. But these toddlers, they ask why till they're satisfied. And once the answer of the question starts repeating their answer, then you're getting to the true reason. And that's the barrier you want to address. So in this case, we were asking, so why don't you use the password manager? And then some people said it's too complex. So that's where you want to facilitate. But some people also say, yeah, none of my colleagues do it. and my manager doesn't talk to me about it. So apparently it's not important. And if this is the case, then you want to start talking to managers to make sure that they address these issues during an evaluation interview or during a talk that you have every other week. So this way you help motivate them and show them that the company thinks this is an important topic that should be addressed, and where you as an employee should devote your time to.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it makes clear that there are multiple different ways to motivate employees, and I think one of your examples is also that you need to convince leadership to actually be motivated or to also train and tell their employees to do it as well.
That's a big one actually, because this is one. So mostly we think we know what drives people. Think about your family. You know why they don't want to do the dishes. But ask them. And the same goes for your employees. So you might, because you're a human being, you think you're able to fill in for them what drives them. But you're never fully able to do this. Even I've been doing these kind of interviews for over 5 years now. My colleague has been doing them for over 10 years. But a while ago, we had an interview and there was a whole new reason we'd never heard before for not wearing your tag. So even us, after doing these interviews for over 10 years, we still don't know all the reasons. And you really want to get to someone's personal reason for not showing the behavior when it comes to motivation. And that's the reason you want to address.
Okay, thanks. I think it clarifies also the answer of well, I can't say the name. I also have maybe a tricky question. It's not really about your data you presented, but it is something that we do regularly with our SAFE program, our Security Addressed for Everyone program, where we try to help clients and change behavior of their employees. There's a question, maybe a little bit cynical, but it says it's recognizing of phishing emails and actually recognizing wrong URLs or false URLs is already quite hard for professionals. How would you expect that from or how
a regular person?
Yeah, can you expect that from a regular employee, or do you have to just simply acknowledge the fact that there's always someone who is going to click on a phishing email in this case, and that you have to focus on incident response?
Well, both, I would say. Yeah, especially in this case, because it's really complex. And you've probably been watching the talk by Fleur van Leeusten, I guess. What are we phishing for? And she's a CISO, and she was presenting her findings to a whole hall of experts. And these experts weren't able to correctly guess whether the example she was showing was an actual phishing mail or not. And it's true, it's really difficult because these phishing mails are getting better every time. So if we cannot ask it of experts, how can we ask a regular employee whose main topic isn't security to be able to guess correctly if a mail is a phishing mail? I don't think we're able to ask that of our employees. We are able, on the other hand, to train them as well as we can and to help them to be able to recognize these mails. And if in doubt, please go check with someone who can do the research. So forward the email to IT and make sure your laptop, if you clicked, is no longer connected to the network. So it's separated. So proper research can be done into what's happening on this computer of the employee that accidentally clicked. Because yes, it is going to happen. And even an expert might be the one who's clicked on the link. What we see in our phishing campaigns is that IT generally overestimate themselves. So they say, we're able to recognize these mails because we're IT, but then they still click on the link. And it's always really funny to show these results because they're surprised that the number is IT is big. So experts are gonna click too, probably, but you still want to train people. So that's your first step of defense. Have your people being aware that these mails are sent. But then apart from that, you also want to have your incident response process in order. So if it happens, and it is going to happen, make sure that people know where to report incidents, where to go, and that the people treating these incidents know where to go as well and know who to talk to.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, because I think the question is also in line in how we approach security and the prevention side, and also I think the incident response side, because well, from our team, we do a lot about the prevention side on changing behaviors and making sure that people report incidents.
Yeah.
But even if an incident is reported, it can also trigger an incident because then you have the right behavior from the employee, but he or she might have already clicked on something. So I think that's also why we organize tabletop crisis management.
Go practice these incidents because they're bound to happen, and it really helps if someone has experienced something like that before, especially your incident response team. So it really helps them to know what they should do if something actually happens. And you see that behavior is way better and the response time is way better if they've been practicing before.
Yeah, and I think that I think we have one final question left. If I just look at our marketing director, but there's a question which is very familiar to what we see in practice, and that's someone, and I see it's a client of ours. He's asking, when focusing on knowledge and awareness, is information overload also an issue?
Definitely.
And he says, in my experience, there are so much policies and procedures on all kinds of different compliancy issues that we're all fighting each other over the attention of the users and employees.
Yeah.
And how would you
go about this?
Yes.
Thank you for this question. That's why we say, okay, there's a list of findings always when we do a measurement, but take the top 5 because that's your big risks, and that's where you want to focus on now. That's where you have your low-hanging fruit, but also if this was bound to happen, this specific situation, then you want to be prepared for that specific situation, and you don't want to overload people because then it's security for most people is not even their main topic. So make it easy for them, and that touches on the third factor. So you should also make it manageable for your people. So they should have the opportunity to process the information that you deliver to them. And if it's going to be all the findings that you have and you translate them into huge legal manuals, people are not going to read those. So then you might think you have your measurements in place, but if people don't read them, and you're still nowhere.
Yeah, and I also think that the question is also a little bit about how do you compete with other departments, for example, compliance and maybe health and safety in some organizations, or HR who has their different training programs. You don't want to compete, I think, as an information security department.
No.
You want to collaborate with your other training colleagues, because that is the role that sometimes is given to an information security officer. Yeah. How do you manage that in practice?
Talk, communicate, like in every situation. For example, we have a huge program at one of our clients, and our contact person failed to mention this to the communication department. So communication blocked the whole program because they said this is not the way to go within our organization. And this is exactly what you don't want to happen. So talk to all your stakeholders and make sure that you work together. And you don't want to, yes, it might sometimes feel like fighting over the attention, but you want the employees to be able to absorb the knowledge or the motivational intervention that you're sending to them. So then you do have to communicate with marketing or communication or the legal department or the compliance department to make sure that you time everything properly. And the good thing is that security, well, it's there's laws for it now. So companies have to do something about it, and that's helping you to get your program into the organization.
Yeah, and maybe also to be a little bit more, taking the initiative to collaborate within an organization, to get someone from communications, to get someone from HR. Well, also to discuss when are my activities planned and when are your activities planned, and how can we make sure that we don't overload employees with information.
How can we make sure that we strengthen each other's programs instead of getting in each other's way?
Yeah. I see that there are still some other questions left. What we will do is we'll answer them later onwards.
Yep.
Thank you for attending our webinar, and thank you for asking these questions, of course. Okay. I would like to thank you, Sophie, for giving the webinar, and the people at home. Please don't close the browser yet, because a screen will automatically appear after the webinar ends. And your feedback is very valuable for us, so we can learn from your experiences. And also, if you have some suggestions, we will definitely make sure that in Q3 we get back to them.
Yeah. Also, if you might not have questions now, but if you have them later, please send us an email, and we'll get back with you too.
To safe@secura. Thank you for attending the webinar, and have a nice day.